Week 7, Day 1. Implacable. Cannot be pacified, inexorable.
The detective was implacable in his search for the murder weapon.
Paroxysm. A fit, sudden outburst.
In a paroxysm of rage, the tenant stormed out of the landlord's office.
Reprehensible. Worthy of blame.
The brash student was forced to apologize for her reprehensible conduct.
Jurisdiction. Power, range of authority.
Saying that it was beyond his jurisdiction, Judge Klein refused to rule on the case.
Skirmish. Small fight, brief encounter.
The precocious boy enjoyed an intellectual skirmish with his elders.
Cause célèbre. A famous law case or controversy.
It was a minor dispute, but the ambitious lawyer sought to turn it into a cause célèbre.
Much ado about a haircut. Perhaps you read about our school in the newspapers. We were one of the first to have a showdown on the topic of long hair for boys. 2 honor students, Ron Harris and Len Chester, were sent to the principal by their French teacher, an implacable foe of nonconformists, who went into a paroxysm of anger when she spied the boys in the hall. At first, it seemed like a simple case. The school would reprimand the boys for their reprehensible appearance and order them to cut their hair or be suspended. But the boys' parents decided that the school had overstepped its jurisdiction. They took their case to the newspapers. What had started as a local skirmish now began to take on the appearance of a full-scale war.
Week 7, Day 2. Harass. To trouble, torment.
If anonymous telephone callers harass you, the phone company will give you an unlisted number.
Monolithic. Massively solid.
George Orwell's 1984 depicts a frightening, monolithic government.
Arbitrary. Based on whim, dictatorial.
To my mind the decision was unreasonable and arbitrary.
Indigent. Poor, needy.
The indigent client was surprised when she was accosted by her social worker in the elegant restaurant.
Fray. A fight.
After the fray, the feuding families agreed to patch up their differences.
One swallow does not make a summer. Don't jump to conclusions based on incomplete evidence.
Sure, the Yankees won their opening game, but one swallow does not make a summer.
The tempest spills out of the teapot. Once the newspapers got the story, the case of the Longhairs became a cause célèbre. Ron and Len were interviewed, seen on TV, and regarded by their fellow students as heroes. These are not delinquents or hoods, one reporter wrote, but clean-cut American boys, who are being harassed by a monolithic school system. A caustic editorial referred to the school's decision as arbitrary and inane. A false story even circulated about the boys being rock and roll performers, whose indigent families needed their salaries. Finally, the Civil Liberties Union jumped into the fray, with a court order stipulating that the principal be required to show cause why the boys should not be allowed to return to class.
Week 7, Day 3. Stymie. To hinder, impede.
Cause of cancer continues to stymie doctors.
Effigy. A likeness, usually of a hated person.
Coach of losing team hanged in effigy.
Flout. Show contempt, scoff.
Many motorists flout traffic laws, study reveals.
Cognizant. Aware.
FBI cognizant of clandestine gangland meeting.
Turbulent. Unruly, agitated.
Turbulent atmosphere in angry Senate chamber.
A bitter pill to swallow. A humiliating defeat.
It was a bitter pill to swallow for the famous billiard player to be overwhelmed by the 12-year-old girl.
Haircut dilemma. The school authorities were stymied. Public opinion had been marshaled against them. No longer was it a simple case of disciplining two wayward lads. Suddenly, it had taken on the appearance of a nightmare, in which the principal was either hanged in effigy, or pictured in cartoons making a villainous swipe at the two innocent Samsons. But the officials could not allow Ron and Len to flout their authority with impunity. Members of the school board concurred with the principal's action, but they were cognizant of the popular support for the boys. Clearly, a compromise was called for to resolve the turbulent situation.
Week 7, Day 4. Terminate. To end.
It seemed incongruous to terminate his employment just when he was so successful.
Forthwith. Immediately.
Upon seeing the show, he called the TV studio forthwith to protest.
Exacerbate. To irritate, make worse.
The arrest of the spy did much to exacerbate relations between the two countries.
Revert. Return.
After taking the drug, she began to revert to the days of her childhood.
Oust. To drive out, eject.
The ushers moved with alacrity to oust the disorderly patrons.
An axe to grind. Having a selfish motive in the background.
I am always dubious about the motives of a man who tells me that he has no axe to grind.
Happy ending. Following an executive session, the school board ordered the principal to terminate the suspension and to send the boys back to class forthwith. Unless it could be shown that their presence disrupted the learning process, there was no reason to bar the boys. It was a bitter pill to swallow for the principal, whose irritation was exacerbated by the ruling. But some of the sting was taken out of the victory when the boys appeared in school the next day, with their hair clipped to a respectable length. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Just as things were about to revert to normalcy, however, the same French teacher then demanded that a girl be ousted from school for wearing a mini skirt.
Week 8, Day 1. Emaciated. Abnormally thin, wasted away.
The emaciated residents of the Warsaw Ghetto managed to win several skirmishes from the Nazis.
Surge. To rush suddenly.
Chicago put its heaviest players up front, but they were helpless as the Giants' line surged toward them.
Tranquil. Quiet.
A firecracker terminated the tranquil climate of the neighborhood.
Sanctuary. Shelter.
When Richard III violated the sanctuary of the church to seize the princes, he exceeded his jurisdiction.
Ascend. To rise.
Inexorably the determined climber began to ascend the Himalayan peak.
Sour grapes. To disparage something that you cannot have.
Marcia said that she didn't want to be on the principal's honor roll anyway, but we knew that it was just sour grapes on her part.
Enter Dr. Thomas Anthony Dooley. In 1956, Look magazine named Thomas Dooley as one of the year's 10 most outstanding men. Just under 30 years of age at the time, Dr. Dooley had already distinguished himself by caring for 500,000 sick and emaciated Vietnamese refugees. When fighting broke out in the divided country of Vietnam, the Northern Communist Viet Minh forces surged southward, scattering thousands of refugees before them. At the time, Dr. Dooley was a lieutenant, assigned to a tranquil naval hospital in Yokosuka, Japan. Forthwith he volunteered for duty on a Navy ship that had been chosen to transport the refugees to sanctuary in Saigon. The curtain was beginning to ascend on Dooley's real career.
Week 8, Day 2. Malnutrition. Faulty or inadequate diet.
The emaciated prisoners were obviously suffering from advanced malnutrition.
Afflict. To trouble greatly, to distress.
Citizens of several Kentucky mountain communities are afflicted by the worst poverty in the nation.
Besiege. To surround, hem in.
By running up a white flag, the besieged troops indicated their desire to withdraw from the fray.
Privation. Lack of necessities.
Albert Schweitzer endured considerable privation as a jungle doctor.
Sinister. Evil, ominous.
The stool pigeon, the detective's confidant, told him about the sinister plot.
To swap horses in midstream. To vote against a candidate running for re-election, to change one's mind.
The mayor asked for our support, pointing out how foolish it would be to swap horses in midstream.
Dooley's mission. Aboard the refugee ship, Dooley's destiny took shape. He became painfully cognizant of the malnutrition, disease, ignorance, and fear that afflicted the natives. In addition, he discerned how active the communists had been in spreading their anti-American propaganda. Tom Dooley pitched in to build shelters in Haiphong, and to comfort the poor Vietnamese there before that besieged city fell to the powerful Viet Minh forces. He was seemingly unconcerned by the many privations he had to endure. For his services, Dooley received the U.S. Navy's Legion of Merit. He told the story of this exciting experience in Deliver Us from Evil, a bestseller that alerted America to the plight of the Vietnamese, as well as to the sinister menace of communism.
Week 8, Day 3. Ubiquitous. Being everywhere at the same time.
Sprinting all over the court, the ubiquitous referee called one foul after another.
Remote. Distant, hidden away.
Ben's reprehensible table manners led his fraternity brothers to seat him in a remote corner of the dining room.
Thwart. To hinder, defeat.
In an attempt to thwart the voracious ants, he surrounded his house with a moat of burning oil.
Harbinger. A forerunner, advance notice.
The excellent soup was a harbinger of the delicious meal to follow.
Malignant. Likely to cause death.
The surgeon finally located the malignant tumor that had afflicted his patient for many months.
To cool one's heels. To be kept waiting.
The shrewd mayor made the angry delegates cool their heels in his outer office.
stymied by personal sickness. After an extensive lecture tour in 1956, Dr. Dooley returned to Laos to set up a mobile medical unit. Because the Geneva Agreement barred the entrance of military personnel to the country, he resigned from the Navy and went to work as a civilian. That story is told in The Edge of Tomorrow. Next year, despite a growing illness, the ubiquitous Dooley turned up in the remote village of Muang Sing, attempting to thwart his traditional enemies, disease, dirt, ignorance, starvation, and hoping to quell the spread of communism. But his trained medical eye soon told him that the pain in his chest and back was a harbinger of a malignant cancer.
Week 8, Day 4. Excruciating. Agonizing, torturing.
With excruciating slowness, the minute hand inched its way around the clock.
Respite. An interval of relief, delay.
The voluble insurance salesman gave my father no respite.
Reverberating. Re-echoing, resounding.
The rescue team heard the miner's voice reverberating through the caves.
Fretful. Worrisome, irritable.
Around income tax time, fretful faces are ubiquitous.
Succumb. To give way, yield.
Besieged by debts, the corporation finally had to succumb to bankruptcy.
A red herring. Something that diverts attention from the main issue.
We felt that the introduction of his war record was a red herring to keep us from inquiring into his graft.
Promises to keep. From August 1959 until his death in January 1961, Dooley suffered almost continuous, excruciating pain. His normal weight of 180 was cut in half, and even the pain-killing drugs could no longer bring relief. Knowing that he did not have long to live, Dr. Dooley worked without respite on behalf of Medico, the organization he had founded to bring medical aid and hope to the world's sick and needy. The lines of Robert Frost kept reverberating in his mind during those fretful days. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep, and miles to go before I sleep. When he finally succumbed, millions throughout the world were stunned and grief-stricken by the tragedy.
Week 9, Day 1. Impresario. One who presents cultural series, organizer.
The eminent impresario brought many cultural spectacles to our shores.
Extortion. Getting money by threats.
When the business manager was accused of extortion, his colleagues sought to oust him from the firm.
Adverse. Unfavorable, harmful.
It was excruciatingly painful for the actors to read the adverse reviews that their performances had received.
Asset. A valuable thing to have.
President Obama found that texting was an asset to his communication skills.
Bigot. A narrow-minded, prejudiced person.
Attacked by the irate crowd, the bigot asked the police for sanctuary.
To spill the beans. To give away a secret.
Although he was naturally reticent, when the felon was intimidated by the members of the rival gang, he spilled the beans.
Just spell the name correctly. P.T. Barnum, the great circus impresario, was once accosted by a woman who showed him a scurrilous manuscript about himself, and said that, unless he paid her, she would have the book printed. Barnum rejected the extortion attempt. Say what you please, he replied, but make sure that you mention me in some way. Then come to me, and I will estimate the value of your services as a publicity agent. Barnum obviously felt that adverse criticism was an asset for a public figure. A man who seeks the limelight should not care what is written about him, but should be concerned only when they stop writing about him. Barnum's philosophy suggests that we might do well to review the plethora of publicity given to rabble-rousers and bigots.
Week 9, Day 2. Blatant. Disagreeably loud, very showy.
With blatant discourtesy, the reporters continued to harass the bereaved family.
Entourage. Group of attendants.
The visiting dictator's ubiquitous entourage of bodyguards disturbed our tranquil city.
Virulent. Full of hate, harmful.
Europe's population was afflicted by a virulent plague known as the Black Death.
Venom. Poison, spite, malice.
Clym Yeobright's mother succumbed to the venom of a snake bite.
Spew. Throw up, vomit, eject.
From each candidate's headquarters acrimonious charges would spew forth daily.
To keep a stiff upper lip. To be courageous in the face of trouble.
It was admirable to see how the British managed to keep a stiff upper lip in spite of the German bombing.
Bigots get publicity. Today, the blatant bigot, the leader of a lunatic fringe, and the hate-monger, each with his tiny entourage, find it relatively easy to attract publicity. Newspapers give space to the virulent activities of those agitators on the grounds that they are newsworthy. TV producers and radio executives, seeking for sensationalism, often extend a welcome to such controversial characters. Yes, said the host of one such program, we invite bigots, but it is only for the purpose of making them look ridiculous, by displaying their inane policies to the public. Some civic-minded organizations have answered, however, that the hosts are not always equipped to demolish those guests, and even if they were, the audience would still be exposed to the venom they spew forth.
Week 9, Day 3. Loath. Unwilling, reluctant.
Since we felt that the ruling was arbitrary, we were loath to obey it.
Solicit. To beg, seek earnestly.
Daily the volunteers went out to solicit funds for the indigent families.
Astute. Keen, shrewd.
My neighbor was astute enough to discern the adverse features of the mortgage.
Advocate. To be in favor of, to support.
The general was sure to advocate that we give the enemy no respite from the bombings.
Ineffectual. Not effective.
The play was so blatantly bad that the impresario fired its ineffectual director.
To have cold feet. To hesitate because of fear or uncertainty.
My cousin was all set to join the paratroops, but at the last moment he got cold feet.
Coping with bigots. Suppose a bigot wished to organize a meeting in your neighborhood. Since we cherish freedom of speech, we are loath to deny the request, even if he preaches hatred. As a result, hate-mongers are given the opportunity to rent halls, conduct meetings, publish abusive literature, and solicit contributions. What can be done about them? One astute observer, Professor S. Anthill Feinberg, advocates the quarantine method. His plan is to give such groups no publicity, and to ignore them completely. Without the warmth of the spotlight, he feels that the bigot will freeze and become ineffectual. Debating with such warped minds is not feasible and only tends to exacerbate the situation.
Week 9, Day 4. Scrutinize. Examine closely.
No sooner did the lawyer scrutinize the extortion note than she called the police.
Nefarious. Villainous, vicious.
We were distraught upon hearing the venom spewed forth by the nefarious bigot.
Amicable. Friendly, peaceful.
Our amicable relations with Latin America are an asset to hemispheric trade.
Vexatious. Annoying.
The vexatious buzzing of the mosquitoes as they surged about our heads nearly drove us insane.
Malady. Disease.
Once the virulent malady had run its course, my temperature dropped.
To look a gift horse in the mouth. To be critical of a present.
Although I didn't have much use for Uncle Roy's present, I took it with a big smile since I have been taught never to look a gift horse in the mouth.
More than silence. The quarantine method for handling bigots implies more than giving them the silent treatment. Professor Feinberg urges community relations organizations to scrutinize the nefarious activities of hate-mongers and to be prepared to furnish information about them to amicable inquirers. When a rabble-rouser is coming, those organizations should privately expose him to opinion molders. In addition, constructive efforts should be taken to induce people to involve themselves in projects for improving intergroup relations. Bigger than the vexatious immediate problem is the need to find out the cause for such bigotry and to counteract this sinister malady that afflicts a segment of our society.